Welcome to the latest episode of Climate Pioneers, featuring innovators changing the face of corporate sustainability. Colgate-Palmolive is the market leader in toothpaste and the $20 billion parent company behind other well-known personal care brands such as Irish Spring and Soft Soap. It has a number of climate goals coming due in 2025, including 20% emissions cut for Scope 1 and Scope 2, and a 20% cut in Scope 3 when it comes to purchased goods and services. Leading that strategy and getting to those goals is Tracy, who's been with the company for more than 3 decades. Welcome, Anne, to Climate Pioneers.
Thanks, Heather. It's terrific to join you today.
It's great to have you. I know that you're not that far away from me. Thanks for joining virtually. I wanted to start with a little bit of the getting to know you section of the interview. You held leadership positions in manufacturing, supply chain, service, and logistics prior to moving over to sustainability. So I'm kind of curious why you made the switch into the sustainability function to begin with.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I've been at Colgate, dare I say, close to 34 years now. And most of my career, I'm an engineer by training, and I love the supply chain. I grew up in the supply chain at Colgate, working across all 4 of our core categories, which you mentioned, oral care, of course, but also personal care products, home care, and pet care. And I've moved around the world a lot. So I've led manufacturing plants and regions and customer service and logistics, as you mentioned. And, along the way, I did play the role of sustainability champion for various division roles. And I guess the way I would answer that is our sustainability, our earlier days of environmental programs grew up in the supply chain. And I think that's the one function where sustainability is truly embedded. We always believed that what was good for the planet was also good for our operations. In fact, for over a decade now, we've had a commitment to invest 5%, at least 5% of our capital investments for our operations in planet-related programs like better lighting, better boilers, more efficient equipment, things like that. Our program really has evolved from our supply chain. So for us, I think it was a natural space for my role to evolve out of. In 2018, I came back to lead both global supply chain strategy and global sustainability. And we built the 2025 strategies that you just referenced. And I told Colgate, I think there's so much work to do right now in sustainability. So I moved from kind of that split role into focusing on sustainability.
Yeah. So I'm curious about that number, the investment number you just mentioned. How did that come about? Is there a board level position that focuses on championing this? I mean, how did that get through? How did you champion that kind of an idea?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I have to say, I've been leading sustainability now 7-8 years at Colgate, but that initiative has been around longer than I've been in this role.
Okay. So
I wasn't at the decision-making table, but I will say this. Our board's very engaged. We can talk about that if you want, but they have to approve our capital budget every year, and they strongly endorse, that focus on the long-term value. In fact, even the short-term benefits and cost benefits of investing in projects that are less impact on the planet.
Mm-hmm. I do want to ask about the board. So how are they engaged? How much time do you spend with them?
I meet with them on a regular basis, and some of them even occasionally one-on-one. And I find them very well educated in this space. We have a committee called, it evolved from the Nom and Gov committee to the Nom, Gov, and Corporate Responsibility Committee. And in our case, all board members attend all committees. So I'm speaking to the full board when I meet with them approximately quarterly, and we focus in that committee. We focus on the topics that are, I would say, the most relevant or the most material to our company. So we'll rotate around updating them on our preparation for regulations, on our plastic strategy, eliminate plastic waste, and on our climate strategy.
And when you talk to the other leadership, I'm curious, you mentioned that congratulations, that's a very respectable tenure. How does that help with your mandate with other executive leaders in the company? Like that background gives you cred to go and talk to these leaders in the business positions. And I'm going to get to where you sit right in a moment, like in the organization. But how does that experience really help you engage with the other leaders at the company and convince them that this is not just an add-on?
Well, I'd answer that in two ways. One, practically speaking, having been at Colgate as long as I have been here, working across, as I mentioned, the different categories, different divisions. Plain and simply, I kind of know everybody. So I can leverage my relationships that I have. People know me. Mm-hmm. I try to be a trusted ally. I do think, people in this role have to demonstrate empathy, humility, and have to be extremely collaborative and have to be comfortable influencing when you don't control everything yourself.
Right.
So I think that's kind of my style, and I think so that works really well in this position. The second thing I would say is, as we've sort of touched on already, is, a lot of what we're doing, and I think, and we'll probably talk about this a little more too, the era that we're entering into for, dare I say, ESG, but I prefer to call it sustainability, is really doubling down now on the business case, on the value creation aspect. And I think, like I said earlier, that's kind of how we've always viewed it in the supply chain. So I think coming from that background helps me to kind of really talk to or demonstrate the value that we have, brought to the company over the years. A fun fact, we focus extremely, we're laser focused on efficiency. So, along the journey to meet some of those climate goals, we have baseline data going back to 2002 on our energy, electricity, utility usage, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. And we have avoided, we measure this every year, we have avoided close to $1 billion in electricity costs since we've been measuring this in the supply chain. So, that's for us, that's a significant number.
Right.
It's a significant number for anyone. So, right. I think we have it in our DNA in the supply chain.
Well, and in 2022, your team moved out of the supply chain organization and over into the commercial side of the business, which I found very interesting. What was the reason for that switch?
Right. So at that time we moved, I think, again, signaling a new era within Colgate, mm-hmm. maybe. We moved out of supply chain into the group called Growth and Strategy, which includes the commercial side of the business, right. which I think signaled how Colgate's was thinking and still thinks about sustainability, to become more integrated and embedded in our business growth strategy and our business plan. In parallel to developing our 2025 sustainability and social impact strategy, we also have a growth strategy for the company, an overall business plan, anchored in our purpose statement, which is to reimagine a healthier future for all people, their pets, and our planet, which we love because we think it also serves as a terrific North Star for our sustainability and social impact strategy. So we are, we are built into that strategy, as you mentioned, not a bolt-on, as a key enabler.
So do you have revenue goals?
Well, that's a great question. And no, it's seen more mm-hmm. as an enabler.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't mean that we're not doubling down on the monetization of the value that we're bringing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, that's the direction I'm trying to take our program. We're very busy, by the way, behind the scenes working on our 2030 strategy, because 2025 is just about.
Right. We're going to get to that in a second here.
Yeah. So that's an important thing we're thinking about going forward.
But just one more question on this. How did that move, that shift, change your perspective? How did your thinking change?
Well, I mean, the other thing that came with that move, which was, I think very helpful, was when we made that move, I became a part of the senior leadership team in the company, the top 24 leaders.
Okay.
So I had a voice at the table.
Nice.
Along with all the other global and business unit leaders. I think that allows me to kind of make sure that sustainability remains built into decisions that we're making. Not to say that there aren't trade-offs and it's not tough, particularly in this environment. But I think that's important. And so I'm peers now with the head of supply chain, with the head of marketing across our categories and so forth.
Okay. 2025 is here. So I'm curious. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's here in a way that none of us imagined. So where does progress stand on your goals? I mentioned a couple at the beginning. I know you have a lot more of the plastics and so forth. So where does progress stand? What have you learned? Give us some.
Well,
some data points
let me start by saying, unlike other companies, we are staying true to our targets. We're not announcing any dial backs or readjusting our targets. I think, when we set these targets way back in 2019 or so, getting ready for this strategy, we worked hard, and this is a principle we're applying going forward as well, to kind of find that balance between ambition and achievable, right? So, so will we hit everyone on the nose? I'm not going to sit here and say, of course we're doing the analysis and the math and juggling the different projects that we know we have to do versus trade-offs as all companies are doing right now. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to, out of the 20%, we're going to get to whatever point, ... I know. But I will say this. I mean, I think we're in a respectable zone, where we don't believe we need to dial anything back. And we have a good story to tell. Particularly, I know, you're talking more about climate. We put a lot of time, resources, and energy around our plastic waste program as well, which I think also has an impact on the climate, on the environment, if you will. I think we're in a very respectable space there. There's hundreds of projects that we're working on to get to the targets that we set for ourselves.
Now, I should mention, which I haven't done yet, that your net zero goal is for 2040, which is aggressive and ambitious. How, you're not dialing back. How are you talking about it? How are you and your team talking about goals internally and externally in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, that seems far off, but on the other hand, we have to build the net zero roadmaps to get us there, site by site, and then rolled up on an enterprise level. And that's the heavy work we're doing right now to get that, more clear. We are SBTI approved for our net zero plan, our targets. And I think we remain the only multinational consumer goods company that has them actually approved. That doesn't mean we have every answer as to how we're going to get there.
Right.
And you were going to mention, I think the new SBTI guidance is just fresh off the press, right?
Right.
And
yep.
We're looking at that now. I can't say that we have a comprehensive answer as to how that's going to help us. We think it'll be positive impact and aligned with our approval already. I think the one thing it does do is it starts to open up the discussion around whether you want to call them offsets or credits and carbon removal, the kind of the more, let's call them verified and, very clear pathway now. I think that the offsets and credits have been something that hasn't been part of the plan, but we've always acknowledged that will have to be a gap closer, but later on in the process. We're focused, if you think of an inverted pyramid, first and foremost on efficiency and reduction, then on really doubling down on our electrification or renewable energy program, And then at the bottom, at the pyramid, is where we start to introduce other techniques, removal, investment in removal, and things like that. But that'll be later on.
So I want to go back to how you talk about this in this moment. Right, we're in a very weird geopolitical climate. How is Colgate talking about where it is on its goals, and engaging with investors? Is there any change that you've made in that regard, or are you still again sticking with your messaging?
I think it's the classic. It depends. I mean, I think when we're dealing with specific stakeholders like NGOs, or you mentioned investors, the dialogue actually hasn't changed a lot when we interact with investors. They're still very interested. I think they still believe that their fiduciary responsibility is understanding the longer term risk that climate and some of these other issues pose for companies. And we agree with that. So we have that, kind of educated, mature dialogue with them. When it comes to much more kind of public external speaking, I think like all other companies, we're being careful about the narrative. We're being careful about what we say. We have to be, but I think internally we still are staying the course.
Now, based on on your analysis of where you've come so far, you're in a process of setting new targets. So, like, what adjustments or what considerations have? Again, you said you're sticking to the true north, if you will. But what adjustments are you making? Like, are there places where you're going to try to accelerate progress, where you think you could get more reductions than maybe you did a few years ago? What changes are you making?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, if you were to look at our strategy, and you're welcome to go to Colgate-Palmolive.com, and sustainability is one of the first clicks.
I have looked.
You can see what, and your audience, so you can see what we're planning. We're literally in the thick of building the 2030 strategy, and I would call it an evolution, not a revolution. And the first thing we've done, and that we are doing, is I called our own internal stock takes, taking stock of where we believe we're going to land with our current set of targets, and taking that into account as we look forward to 2030. And for the first time, honestly, thinking about, okay, what happens beyond 2030? Obviously, with climate, we do have interim targets out to 2040, but even with some of our other areas of focus. And we've laid out a set of principles to guide us as we set our 2030 strategy. And I've been very kind of broken record about them, very repetitive. So I already mentioned targets have to be ambitious but achievable. We're doubling down on the targets have to have value drivers, or have to drive value creation.
An example? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, around, so what's interesting, we have currently in our 2025 target, we have 11 actions. I'm not sure exactly where we'll land. That might go up or down by 1 or 2 for 2030. We're still working through that. But we have subject matter experts that own all of those actions, right? And I joke that I'm the master of none, keeper of all, because my job is to make sure everybody's moving forward on all 11 actions. And I think value creation, maybe I'll pick on, we have an action for 2025, lead with zero waste facilities. So we have really engaged our operations in the same group, GB. Now I'm going to get my acronyms. I have so many acronyms on the brain these days. But USGBC has an arm that developed the LEED certification.
Yeah.
They also developed the True certification program, so that our sites have really embraced that, where we're trying to reduce. They have a long checklist of things you have to adhere to over a year, including less than 10% of the waste out of that site can go to landfill, which is actually quite difficult if you think about big operational sites. And they do fun things like dumpster dives. So the entire factory will shut down for a day, empty all the dumpsters, and all the team at the site will pick through it and figure out what can be reduced, reused, recycled, and eliminated, basically. And they have done some tremendous things to reduce the amount of just overall waste that they generate. And we're not that great at putting hard numbers against it, but the amount of money that saves across all sites that are becoming certified is significant, because you're basically not sending, you're just using, you're more efficient, basically. Efficiency drives savings.
And I cut you off on your list of the principles, but one thing that also intrigued me was you have this swords versus shields philosophy. Right. So describe that to me.
Right. And that is always, so another principle is to remain focused, which is very difficult in this uncertain time and everything. Because you can't, I love a saying that our CEO, Noah Wallace, says is, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. So I love that saying. So, we really have to focus. So swords and shields helps us to focus. Again, referencing the 11 actions, we can't lead in every one of those. So shields are the things we have to get done because of, say, taxes, fees, reputational risk, regulations. Swords are where we want to lead. So we're pretty choiceful about where we want to lead. And across our 3 ambition pillars, driving social impact, helping millions of homes, and preserving our environment, we have a sword in each one. Under driving social impact, it's around our oral health and hygiene, our oral health education program that we bring to children in underserved communities all over the world, called Bright Smiles, Bright Futures. We kind of own that. We should own that. We're the world's, as you mentioned, largest oral health provider. Under helping millions of homes, which is more around our products and our brands, we kind of circle together design sustainable products and eliminate plastic waste, because you can't eliminate plastic waste without design. And then climate. Climate is our big environmental. We feel like we punch above our weight there.
I want to ask one more strategy question before I hit you with some fun ones. Not that these aren't fun, but you had, and I wrote about it last year, you made a big transition to recyclable toothpaste tubes over a period of about 6 years. And that's obviously a plastics goal. How did that intersect with the emissions reductions targets? Like what? Yeah. How do you talk about that together? How is it in service of that? Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think we can do more to talk about that. So when we talk about the action to eliminate plastic waste, obviously one of the key steps that we're taking, as well as design more sustainable products, is to begin to put comprehensive LCA, or life cycle analysis, around all our products, right? So we've done the LCA of, let's say, the new monomaterial HDPE tube versus the old tube, which had a layer of aluminum in the middle. And pleasingly, and to be honest, we didn't set out to do this, but pleasingly, there's over a 25% benefit in carbon reduction during the production of the new tube versus the old tube. So if you think about the fact that we make close to 10 billion tubes every year, that's a lot of carbon benefit. It also, by the way, takes close to 40% less water in the process. So it's an environmentally better tube to make. And I will say, that's when we talk about going back to the beginning of the conversation around where are we going to land with our targets, we're proud of the work we've done to implement that tube across every one of our brands and sub-brands around the world. So, and across all divisions. So we do anticipate, achieving that target to roll that out fully across the business. Okay, great. Thank you. So in the few minutes we have left, let's play a little bit of word association.
Okay.
Okay. You keep your answers short. I'll say a word, you say what comes to your mind. Resistance.
Yeah, resistance. So I feel like you're a psychologist and you're trying to get
I
me
am.
But the first word that comes to mind is honestly determination. Determination to continue to drive transformation through the work we're doing. There is resistance, but it just makes us double down more.
Action.
Action. Action is interesting. Right now, I think what many companies are doing, I know it's a funny regulatory environment out there, whether you're in the US or Europe. But I think what we're striving to do is to find a true balance between action and reporting or disclosure and transparency, which is very important because that demonstrates your action. But we have to make sure we are taking action.
Okay. You're breaking my short answer rule, but
I know, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll try. I'll do better.
All right. Joy.
Being outside in nature.
Ally.
Ally. All my Colgate colleagues across the world. I don't have one in particular. I can't do it without all of them.
Hero.
That's an interesting one. That's hard. It depends what part of my life you're talking about. But I think of my husband. He has enabled me across that long 3-decade career. He's been with me by my side. If he wasn't, I wouldn't be able to be doing what I am now. And I love what I'm doing now.
All right. I'm going to keep going for another minute or two here. Who do you consult for a reality check?
I think it's really important to get external. Don't talk to yourself too much. So I have really worked hard to build a strong network of peers outside as well as experts and mentors. So I always get external when I need a sounding board.
What one question should someone ask every potential hire?
I think I would want to get to the core of what a new hire is passionate about. So what excites you about this job?
How do you recharge your batteries?
So going back to I get outside. I'm a firm believer no matter what the weather is, you need sunlight. Well, not always sunlight, but you need outside.
Yeah.
You need to get outside every day. You need to get into nature.
What advice would you give a new CSO, especially in this moment?
I guess it's build your network. We can't do this. I mean, it's cliche anymore, but companies can't do this alone. So comparing notes and understanding how we can work together and do things like, we didn't talk about it, but share technologies when there needs to be a solution to a problem.
Yeah, like you shared that toothpaste tube design I mentioned before. Yeah.
Right.
Great. And one last one. What would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Always put night cream on. Starting early. We now sell premium skin health products, so I use them liberally, and it helps. No, and I guess I would say, don't worry so much. I mean, when there's problems, there's always a way to figure them out. So, and there's lots of problems to solve, and that should be exciting.
Okay. Yeah, we're very excited at this moment.
if you use that, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was fun. Thank you, Heather. I was glad to join you, and I have a lot of respect for the work you do, so thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the viewers for watching this latest episode of Climate Pioneers.